Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to our virtual high tea with Consul General Emily Cloke. We've all done 1,000 virtual events at this point in time, but I'd wager, Consul General Cloke, that none of us, or very few of us, have done a virtual high tea. So I'm sitting here looking at my my jelly babies. I've got my scones here as well. Many of you who registered early received these generous tea kits, thanks to our friends at the British Consulate-General in LA. So thank you very much for being with us. And thank you to everybody who's taking time out of your busy days, all of you who are joining live, as well as those watching on YouTube now or the recorded version of this. Clearly, the United Kingdom is such an important country. Here in the state of Utah, the UK is our largest export market. That's driven by a couple factors, one being London's center as a hub, as a financial center, as well as the fact that we export gold. And so a lot of gold comes from Utah, goes to London, and in the financial sectors there and elsewhere. But we also have many other companies that have been selling into the UK. We have investment coming from the UK here to Utah, and many companies have been using London or the United Kingdom as a base for their European business. And of course, over the past year and a half or so, it's been a very dynamic time around the world. We have Brexit, we have pandemics, we have a changing market, and Utah continuing to excel, particularly in our tech industry, and engaging with more and more trade with Europe and with the United Kingdom. And so that means it's a dynamic time for all of us. There's a lot of opportunity and also a need for us to have clear insights into the market opportunities, what Brexit means for the future of our trade relationship with the UK and with the European Union, as well as the impact of the pandemic and what that means for trade and this vibrant relationship moving forward. And so first off, Consul General Clark, as I look at the participant list here, we have representatives from some of Utah's largest companies that have operations in the UK. We also have representatives from many of Utah's small companies that are just starting to build up their sales into the United Kingdom. And we also have many service providers and leaders in government and in business that are here, that they themselves are working with many of their client companies who are doing a tremendous amount of business in the UK. So we have a great group here. I'd like to highlight Chris Boyle, who runs our District Export Council, as well as Franz Kolb, who is, I like to joke that if Utah were a country, Franz would be our Secretary of State. And Franz, he works here at the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We have a very close partnership with them. And Franz, before we jump into the program, is there anything that you'd like to say at the top?
No, I just want to say cheers. And I've had the opportunity to be in the United Kingdom from north to south, east to west in my career. Just wonderful. I'm just so delighted to be here eating shortbread and various other things. I'm so grateful for the Consul General and her great staff, and we've had an opportunity to have a virtual meeting here with the Lieutenant Governor a couple of days ago. Thank you very much, Madam Consul General. We are excited. We talked about heritage before and all the many connections that we've made over the years. We are so grateful again, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful hour of communication, fun, learning about culture and business opportunities. Again, thank you very much for the invitation. And Utah is ready. We are ready. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Franz, very much. And one thing I didn't know is, as we get back into in-person travel again, one of our first trips here from the state of Utah is going to be to London. DSEI is a phenomenal aerospace and defense show happening in September. As of yet, that has not been postponed. And so we have many companies who are lining up ready to go to jump back into the fray. And that's the fact that that's our first trip signals how important this market is for us. So let's go ahead and jump into the program very quickly for everybody who's participating. If it wasn't for the pandemic, we would be doing this in person. We'd be around a table. We would have our scones and our tea, and we'd be having a great conversation. And we want today to be a discussion, a roundtable discussion. And so I'll briefly provide a little bit of background about Consul General Cloke and her impressive diplomatic background. We'll have some opening remarks from her, and then we'll jump into the discussion. And I've got a long list of questions here, but I would much rather have you jump in, turn your videos on, unmute yourself, and engage in the discussion. And the more vibrant the discussion, the more beneficial this is going to be for all of us. And at the end of the day, as we view how successful these events are, it's not but just by the quality of the discussion, but it's the positive action that results from the discussion. And so feel free to get detailed, get action oriented. We want this to be helpful for you and your company as you're figuring out the best path forward to build and strengthen your business ties in the United Kingdom. So without further ado, it's my honor to introduce Consul General Emily Cloke. Consul General Cloke is the British Consul General in Los Angeles. She is the senior representative of the UK government in Southern California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Hawaii. In this role, she promotes trade and investment, scientific cooperation, tackling climate change, creative and media collaborations, and educational partnerships between the UK and the southwestern United States. She also oversees delivery of essential consular services to a 600,000 strong British resident community and British visitors. Emily has a range of policy, commercial, and international experience working for the British government. Her recent roles include as Deputy CEO for the UK Africa Investment Summit, hosted by the Prime Minister in 2020, and as a senior leader in the Department for International Trade Sectors Group, overseeing export and investment promotion for industry sectors, including aerospace, advanced manufacturing, and education. She has also worked overseas as Trade Director for the British Embassy Tehran, setting up and leading the UK's trade section and strategy following the reopening of the British Embassy in 2015, and as Head of Trade at the British Embassy in Sweden. Her wider experience includes advising on the creation of the world's first green investment bank and leading the ministerial private office for the Minister of Employment Relations and Consumer Affairs and for the Minister of Women and Equalities. Emily started her career as a lawyer in the City of London and studied law at Cambridge University. So Emily, Consul General Cloke, thank you so much for being with us today. I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, I'm so thrilled to be here with you today, and I'm very much looking forward to the time that I can also come to Utah and see you in person. It is such a beautiful place, and I've just been so delighted by the warmth of the reception that I've received. So really looking forward to that. Thank you, WTC Utah, in particular, Miles, to you, as well as to Hannah Hutt and Franz. Thank you so much for the introduction as well. It was such a pleasure to meet with you, the Lieutenant Governor, and others. And I'm really looking forward to what we can achieve between the UK and Utah. So I started my role as the British Consul General back in September. I arrived with my husband and my daughter to LA. Obviously not always the easiest time to arrive in a new country with a pandemic, but I'm so thrilled to be in such a wonderful, innovative part of the world where there is just so much scope for an even closer partnership between the UK and the US. Miles, you've already remarked on the tea that we have in front of us today. So the afternoon tea is a strong tradition in the UK with delights from scones or scones, depending on pronunciation, cream and jam, sandwiches, and other treats. How we drink our tea can often be a source of debate. So with the interest of full disclosure, I take mine with a lot of milk, choosing English breakfast or Earl Grey. But the afternoon tea, in my view anyway, doesn't preclude another hot beverage should you so wish. So this roundtable that we have today is part of my virtual visit to Utah, which is a week-long set of engagements, activities, meetings. As I've said, it involves, or it started with a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor earlier this month, where we discussed the strong ties of culture and values between the UK and Utah, our wider close links, and also our commitment to extending the economic ties between the UK and Utah. And I'm personally committed to this. I've been so impressed so far with Utah, which is a leading business destination. So Forbes has ranked Utah as the top 3 best state for business, including 6 times in the #1 spot. In the most recent Hackman Index, Utah has the most diverse economy in the country. And Utah cities featured strongly in the Milken Institute's recent study on best performing cities in the US, with 5 in the top 10, no mean feat. The nation's top ranked metro area was Provo-Orem, Salt Lake City 4th, and Ogden-Clearfield at number 9. So that's really impressive. So I'm really glad that the UK is Utah's top export market, and the UK is the top investor of Utah. It's also worth mentioning the remarkable tech cluster, which has generated multiple unicorns in Utah. And yesterday I met with Silicon Slopes and heard about what was described as the insatiable entrepreneurial spirit in Utah. And we talked about different ways that Utah and the UK could work even more closely together on the tech side. There is also the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, you know, the leading film festival in the US. Again, really looking forward to the time that I can experience that in person. And also the high-level SmallSat conference in Logan, which hosts numerous excellent UK satellite companies and where we've had a really strong presence the last 2 times it gathered in person. So we believe that the UK is the natural partner with Utah. The UK, in my view, is a world-leading investment destination with brilliant universities across the breadth of the UK, fantastic, innovative companies with a global outlook, and a fantastic science base. And that's just a few areas that I wanted to mention. There are many more. And we are, of course, like you and others, committed to building back better after the devastating impacts from COVID-19. Today, I wanted to highlight 2 areas in particular that are a focus for the UK in 2021, and that's trade and investment, as well as our ambition for COP26. So on trade, having left the European Union, the UK will now get to decide how we set and maintain our own laws, standards, and regulations. The UK government has announced its aim to secure free trade agreements with countries covering 80% of UK trade within 3 years of leaving the EU. In under 2 years, we've agreed trade deals with 64 countries, plus the EU, that account for more than $1.25 trillion of UK bilateral trade in 2019, and that is unprecedented. No other country has ever negotiated so many trade deals simultaneously. The trade deal with the EU, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, is a high-quality free trade agreement and the first free trade agreement the EU has ever reached based on 0 tariffs and quotas. In 2021, we want to add to these deals. Negotiations are already underway with Australia and New Zealand, and of course, we want to secure an agreement with the US. Accession to CPTPP remains a priority for 2021 and an important part of our strategy to place the UK at the centre of a modern network of free trade agreements. We're keen to agree an FTA with the US, and we believe it has the potential to further strengthen and deepen our deep trade and investment relationship. Our own analysis shows that an ambitious FTA could increase GDP in the US by $10 billion. With the previous administration, we have had 5 negotiating rounds, so there is a strong basis to continue discussions in the future. Promoting free trade is a top priority also for the UK's presidency of the G7, which started in January. The UK will work with our G7 partners to ensure the global free trading system on which our economies are based remains fair, competitive, and secure. In order to boost the global recovery, the G7 will look to harness its shared belief in free and fair trade to drive growth through open, resilient, greener, and inclusive trade. Here at the Consulate, the UK Consulate, we have a really strong team dedicated to supporting UK companies to export to and invest in the US, and also to help drive investment into the UK across a range of sectors from consumer goods to aerospace, creative industries, and renewable energy, just to name a few. We also have trade policy advisors who are helping to support our ambition to secure a free trade agreement, as well as look and see where we can further our economic cooperation at state level. So I'm really delighted that with me today, I have Carlo Cavagna, who's our trade director in the consulate, and also Will Powles, our first secretary for trade, with me today, our trade experts, where we can really answer a range of your questions that you might have and have a really good discussion. The second area that I also wanted to highlight is COP26. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said, we owe it to our future generations to build back better and base our recovery on solid foundations, including a fairer, greener, and more resilient global economy. The UK will take this forward by hosting the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow in November this year. Climate sustainability and reducing emissions in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement is a top priority for the UK government. The UK will also use its G7 presidency to advance this agenda and harness the G7's strength to provide momentum in the run-up to COP26. We believe the benefits are numerous, from cleaner air to healthier communities, sustainable economic growth, energy security, and a safer, more stable climate. We believe that clean growth presents the most significant economic growth opportunity of this century. The UK was the first major economy to set a net zero target by 2050 in law, aiming to lead the world in how quickly it can reduce emissions. And late last year, we went further. The UK announced it will reduce its own emissions by 68% by 2030, compared to 1990 levels. The UK has also published its own 10-point plan, that was late last year, to launch what we're calling a green industrial revolution within the UK. It aims to support 250,000 highly skilled green jobs and deliver the economy of the future through investment in clean energy, transport, nature, and innovative technologies. One of the landmark commitments in that plan is to end the sale of cars and vans wholly powered by gas and diesel by 2030 in the UK. We have world-leading capabilities in areas including offshore wind, smart energy systems, sustainable construction, precision agriculture, green finance, and electric vehicle manufacture. We are partnering with governments at federal and state level, businesses, academia, and wider society to try and raise the ambition on our sustainability and environment goals, both in the run-up to COP26 as well as after. And we are looking forward to working closely with Utah. I look forward to our discussion today and to explore how we can work together even more closely. Thank you so much. Miles, over to you again.
Consul General Cloke, thank you very much for those opening remarks. And it's clear as you were hitting a few of those points, and so taking notes of clear areas where we have Utah companies that are doing exciting, innovative things and competing and winning in global markets in areas that align not just commercially, but with your strategic objectives as well. And several Utah companies are doing some great things when it comes to clean technology and making sure that we are developing the innovations that will fuel clean growth in the years and decades to come. And so that's an area that I'd love to dig into a little bit later. First off, like I mentioned, I've got several questions, but this is a discussion for our companies that are joining. And so I'd like to go ahead and open it up and see if anybody wants to go ahead and ask that first question.
Miles, I'd just like to say one thing, and I think
please.
I'd like to, and I think we all like to recognize Mr. Frank Joklik, the Honorary Consul Emeritus, who was swinging the flag of the United Kingdom for many decades here in Utah. And I'm seeing him here, and I'm so grateful that Frank is joining us. Just a great, great friend of Her Majesty's Diplomatic Corps. So thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Hi.
Thank you, Franz.
Frank, you've got the greatest expertise here on this call between Utah and UK ties. Is there a question that you'd like to ask of the Consul General, or do you have any perspective that you'd like to kick off this discussion?
Well, there's just one point I'd like to raise, and that is this. In the aftermath now of the conclusion of Brexit, it's a fait accompli now. And I think that the British economy is going for a few months, perhaps, or perhaps years, going to have to readjust to this. And one thing that Britain's always been famous for, I think, is excellent research and development. And, you know, some of the best universities in the world. And then we have the Silicon Roundabout outside of London and other things that are taking place. And in relation to that, I just want to make one comment here. That is that the expenditure in Britain on research and development in terms of both percentage of GDP and per capita is only about half of what other advanced nations are spending at this time. And is this a temporary kind of phenomenon, or does R&D really require a bit of a boost in Britain now, which would undoubtedly be of benefit to the economy?
Thank you so much for those comments. And you know, I agree with you. I think the fundamentals of the British economy are strong, from, you know, our research base, universities, the partnership between business and universities. I think, you know, centres like Oxford, Cambridge, London are really testament to that. In terms of research and development, you know, it's difficult for me to sort of compare spending with other countries. So that's definitely something that I'll take away and look into. But, you know, the UK's capabilities on the science and innovation side is incredibly strong. And, you know, sectors of the economy, you know, are thriving in that regard. But as I do have one of my experts on the call with me today who looks after a range of sectors in our consulate, and, you know, where we're also making sure that the FDI we sort of try and bring into the UK is targeted around R&D, I'm going to just pass on now to Carlo Cavagna for any follow-up remarks he'd like to make on that specific question at the end on R&D. Carlo, I'd like to pass to you at this point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily, and hello, Frank. It's great to see you. It was wonderful to work with you in your many successful years when you were an indispensable honorary consul for us in Utah. So thank you. I've just dropped in chat for people's information a link to the UK's research and development R&D, research and development tax credit, as a point of interest if anybody wants to see it. Increasing R&D expenditure is a main focus of the UK government right now, and the research and development tax credit is a big part of that. Large companies can get a 130% benefit. Small and medium-sized companies can get something, I believe it's up to 230%. We think it's one of the most flexible and generous R&D tax credits in the world. We do want to increase the proportion of R&D as a portion of GDP, because we do recognize that the UK's future, like that of the United States, lies in having a significant portion of the economy being kind of a knowledge economy and a high-tech, high-skills economy. There's also a number of bodies that give grant funding to companies that apply, including UK Innovation Council and a number of others. US companies are eligible to apply for those grants as well. They just have to set up a UK entity and perform some R&D in the UK. And we see a lot of companies doing that in aerospace and life sciences and across a number of sectors. So I guess my answer to you, Frank, is that there is a strategy in place. And I think if anything, it will only deepen over the next few years. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carlo. Go ahead. That's great. Carlo, thank you for that. And I'd encourage anybody who's interested in this, and particularly these incentive programs, to take a look at the website and then reach out. And we'd love, I'm sure, Carlo, I'm sure that you'd be more than happy to jump on a call and talk to any companies that could be interested in learning more about it and learning how to avail themselves of these programs.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jim Beddoes just reached out, and Jim, I think you're on the call, but Jim is asking about continuing on this theme on education partnerships and R&D partnerships. Jim is asking if Consul General, if you could provide a little bit more context about how the Consulate General and the British government facilitates education partnerships between the UK and the United States, and if there are companies that are involved in education, or we have several people representing universities here. There are universities that would like to explore building out and strengthening education partnerships. What advice would you have to them?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. So just to say a little bit about the UK consulate, I mean, we have a range of different experts working to support the UK-US relationship. So I've talked through a little bit about the Department for International Trade that's very much focused on investment, export, trade policy. We have a science and innovation lead who is, really thinking about the unique strengths of the UK-US, where it makes sense to come together and sort of help facilitate introductions. And then we have other areas like we have our Visit Britain team, which is all about, increasing tourism to the UK and highlighting the UK as a visit destination. We've got our British Film Commission, which is all about encouraging production to take place in the UK. So we've got a climate lead in recognition of COP26. So we've got a range of different staff working with us. And, what we're really looking to do is strengthen and expand the UK-US relationship. And that is the heart, really, of everything that we do. And our experts are constantly thinking, where does it make sense to facilitate these partnerships? Where does it make sense to do more on opportunities? So we're working with, on our side, states, cities at official level. We're working with the business community who want to export to invest in the US. So we're really a facilitator, in that regard. So I think it really depends on the case in question, to be honest. See, we don't have infinite resource, but, if it's a business wanting to, for example, export to and invest in the UK, we've got our team. Carlo's the head of it here to help with that. But we also have a network of advisors across the UK that do a lot of work with SMEs. And so there is a first port of call that can then assess, well, who is the right person to be facilitating it? Where could we provide help? And there'll also be a range of online resources that we have to help with that too. So the work that we do is multifaceted. We want to be strategic in where we have scope to add value. And, it's worth saying that the way we're having to work, particularly with COVID-19 and not being able to do things at the moment in person, means we're working very differently, but that also has silver linings. So the fact that I can travel to Utah whenever I want in some ways virtually is a benefit. And that goes for my team as well. So I think in some ways, actually, it has made the way we're working easier, and we can have a broader and better and deeper reach. And I think, I, of course, don't get me wrong, I'm really looking forward to the time that we can all gather in person, but I think we'll want to keep that part of that way of working in the future too. Thank you.
Thank you. You're absolutely correct. I think that this pandemic has forced all of us to adopt these virtual tools that existed before the pandemic, but now we've all become very proficient in them. And it's exciting to us as we help facilitate trade and investment between Utah and our partners around the world to think through, okay, now we have the virtual tools. Once we get back in person, how do we combine those and generate synergies and productivity that never existed before? Because we are learning how to do things in a new, innovative way. And so that I think makes me very bullish and excited about what is to come over the next 12 and 18 months as we get through this pandemic. Absolutely. So Paul Corson is with Pivot. Pivot is the organization at the University of Utah that is focused on shaping the R&D and the innovation that's happening at the University of Utah, helping to commercialize that and launch companies from that. They are, by several metrics, one of the best performing innovation and commercialization organizations in the country. And Paul, I know you had a question, so I'd like to go ahead and pass the baton over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. I was fortunate to know your predecessor, Consul General. I met him when I was working for the University of California. I think it was his first week, and the moving boxes had just shown up. So we were having tea at the consul while the movers moved everything in. And at the time, we had offered through UC system to engage on innovation. I would just like to extend that, and I can follow up with Carlo and others. But we would very much like to collaborate any way that we could. I have a personal affinity. I studied at the University of Colchester back in the 90s and enjoyed my time. It was, I didn't know that it was a somewhat communist focused university at the time, but I was studying Russian studies. And it was a fantastic experience, and then got to see much of the country. So we'd just love to work with you as things go on and make your time here successful.
Thank you so much. And I, as part of my virtual visit, I've had an initial meeting with the University of Utah, and I'll be continuing that engagement. So thank you so much for extending that. I have already heard about, the brilliant work going on in the University of Utah on commercializing research. And I think, it's very much a world leader in that regard. So thank you so much for the offer. I'd love to take you up on that.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. So, Paul, we'll have to get connected with Consul General and Carlo after the fact. And as you think through specific opportunities in areas of strength that you see, let's get a conversation going and we can start to pursue those and get some momentum going. So let's go ahead and we've talked about education. We've talked about partnerships on R&D, which is critical. I'd like to spend a couple minutes diving a little bit deeper, if we can, on free trade agreements. I think it's fascinating to think about this dynamic, and we've obviously, a lot of companies have been using the UK as a base of operations for Europe. So it's encouraging to hear the progress that's being made in that free trade agreement. But could you speak a little bit more about the dynamic between the EU and the UK? And if I'm one of the many Utah companies that's been there in the UK now trying to figure out how do they need to go and open up another office in the EU and have their operations in the UK focus only on the UK, what type of advice would you have for several of the companies I know that are on the call in this situation as they try to assess what's going to make the most business sense for them moving forward?
Sure, and thank you so much for that question. So the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that came into force sets out a framework. And I mentioned during my opening remarks that it's the first one to be, zero tariff, which is great for goods. And it also goes into detail in other areas, including on services, but there will be other areas where there'll need to be further detail in the future. So there is a framework there, and the UK government is committed to making sure that, the range of businesses and people affected have the information readily available, SMEs being an example. The rules, of course, have changed as a result of leaving the EU. We now have the ability to strike free tradements around the world. And I think there's a really fantastic opportunity to do that and really make sure that our belief in the fundamentals of free trade can make it even more beneficial for our businesses and businesses around the world to trade from the UK. So I think there are some really fantastic opportunities that we have ahead for us in 2021 that we want to make sure that we really grasp. I think it's just worth also saying that there's a range of areas of information on our .gov websites. We have a range of trade advisors, investment advisors that work for the government that are advising businesses, including those based in the UK, wanting to continue to trade with the EU, but other markets available. So we have a range of resources that separately would be happy to share with you separately, if that would be of help.
That's great. Thank you very much. And so I'd encourage, again, the companies that are in the situation trying to navigate things. Clearly, we've got great partners here who can get you good insights and perspective on the best way to proceed. As you think about what Brexit means, and in this, I love this idea of putting the UK at the center of a network of free trade agreements, and really, truly free trade agreements like you have, zero tariffs. That's phenomenal. Can you speak a little bit about the process with the United States? I know we've had a change in administration, but clearly, strong bipartisan support. here in the United States for a very, very strong, robust free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Senator Mike Lee, who represents Utah, has introduced legislation to help support and keep the process moving forward, recognizing the special relationship and all of the opportunity we have to, given the dynamic situation with the pandemic and with Brexit, to grow and expand and deepen the relationship. Can you give us a little bit of color on that process and the negotiations that are going back and forth? What do you see as some of the key opportunities that a free trade agreement that could end up with improved opportunities for U.S. companies in the UK and vice versa, as well as what are some of the challenges to reaching a deal, getting it ratified, and moving forward with it?
Great question. Thank you so much. So I mentioned in my opening remarks that with the previous administration, there were 5 rounds of negotiations. It covered a lot of different ground during those discussions, and there is a strong basis for continuing that, we believe, with the new administration. So look forward to working with Catherine Tai on that one. So I can't comment on, the detail of those negotiations that had taken place within the previous administration. But as I mentioned, there is a strong foundation there that we'd like to take forward. And I think, that the benefit of a free trade agreement is various. There are benefits if we can negotiate them right around, removing tariffs, barriers to trade. And I think, if the range of our businesses in the US and the UK can benefit, that would be fantastic. And, we've got economic analysis and research that shows that there is benefit both to the UK and also to the US. But I think there's areas that we can look to be ambitious. So if an FTA could set new standards for FTAs around the world in areas like digital trade, for example, on sustainability, empowerment in different areas, I think that could be really fantastic. So I think there's a range of areas that hopefully we could look to work together on. I'm lucky enough to be joined with another trade expert from the consulate, Will Powles, who is the first secretary for trade policy. So a lot of his work is around looking at where there could be areas at the state level to increase economic cooperation, but also in supporting some of our work on the FTA. So I'd just like to pass over to Will now to see if there's any other comments he'd like to make in answer to your question, Miles.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks, Miles. I'll just keep it very short because I think Emily has set out pretty much everything I would have said, and I agree with everything that she said. For me, this just comes down to one of the most significant philosophical alignments between the UK and the US, and that's in our belief in the value of the free market to be able to create jobs and create growth for both partners when we're talking about economic cooperation. So for us, this has never been a zero-sum game. One of the things that Miles, you mentioned, has had bipartisan support for a while is the fact that through this conversation, we can create more British jobs, we can create more American jobs, we can create more consumer choice in the UK and more consumer choice in the US. And that's been the focus of the 5 rounds of negotiations that Emily mentioned that have been happening over the last few years. And indeed, the exploratory conversations that were happening even before we formally departed from the EU and therefore had our ability to negotiate our own trade deals. So there's so much work that has gone into this up until now. What we would love to see is taking forward that bipartisan support in this country to move the deal to the next stage. Also seizing opportunities around digital trade, as Emily has mentioned, and looking at where we can align some of our goals on sustainability and stewardship of the environment as well, perhaps. There's lots of opportunities to be sought there, but we've made so much progress now, and we're really excited to have the imminent confirmation of the new US TR once the US has gone through that domestic process, so that we can really move forward quickly. But of course, as we've seen with the UK-EU relationship, it doesn't stop there, and the conversation continues. There's lots of different methods for economic cooperation between two countries, and in particular, the US and the UK. As Emily mentioned, part of my work out here in the Southwest is to explore what kind of economic cooperation we can have through government-to-government conversations between the UK and individual states. Utah is, of course, or the UK is Utah's biggest export market, so the relationship between the UK and Utah is incredibly important. And I was pleased that that was recognized in the conversation that the Consul General had with the Lieutenant Governor a few days ago that Franz alluded to. So there's lots of conversation that can be had. The FTA is a big part of that. We're very excited to see that progress in the new administration, given the bipartisan support, and very excited to see all the different types of conversations that we can have going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Emily and Will, for those responses. And one last quick follow-up that I'm getting in here. You mentioned digital trade a couple of times, and that's a key area of opportunity, clearly with how strong Utah's tech ecosystem is, all the exciting things happening in the UK. One question about GDPR. So, of course, for those not familiar, it deals with data privacy. It's been an EU policy that has created some obstacle and some challenges for US companies, and people are figuring out what it means, and they're adapting and adjusting to that. With the free trade agreement that you're looking at with the United States, and given the importance of digital trade, where is the UK? Is the UK pretty firmly lined up with the EU where they were on privacy with, so therefore we should expect that GDPR, something similar to that, should remain in effect? Or is the UK looking at perhaps having different models and different standards that are more harmonized between the UK and the United States?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to pass this one to Will.
Thanks, Miles. So the first thing I should say is that I don't pretend remotely to be an expert on GDPR and digital regulation. So I will do my best to answer this, but I will open by saying I'm very happy to look into the detail of some of this and have conversations with anyone who would like them offline, where we can get into the nitty-gritty of some of it. But just an overall point to make is that free trade agreement negotiations, and indeed all forms of economic diplomacy, are a conversation. And it's important that in that conversation, we're able to talk about all of the options that are on the table and talk about what is going to work best for both sides. That being said, the UK has made quite clear throughout the entire process of its departure from the EU that it's committed to maintaining its high standards across all different sectors, including in the digital space. And part of that has involved the adoption of GDPR. So that is the system that we are currently working with. And I should say it's been amazing to see the resilience of businesses across both sides of the Atlantic in getting used to the way that the system is working. I think that's something that we can often take for granted, but we should always be keeping in mind that businesses should be praised for their versatility and adaptability in that. But yeah, so the overarching point is that yes, we're working with GDPR now. I encourage folks to get in touch with us wherever they're having any trouble in navigating the system, or wherever they're having any trouble in shifting their own approach and methodology to work with that. And as Emily has said, we have a whole team out here to support you guys in seizing opportunities in the UK, and indeed support our folks back in the UK to seize opportunities out here. But it's a conversation. I can't, as Emily said, I can't comment on the detail of specific negotiations that are going on at a federal level. But there's lots to talk about and lots of opportunities to be seized wherever we end up. Yeah,
no, that's very, very helpful, William. None of us are experts on GDPR. It gets pretty detailed pretty quickly, but that provided a really helpful overview and getting some positive feedback here. So thank you for providing that. And again, for any of these companies that are dealing with this, is clearly a dynamic situation as things evolve. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I'm sure we can connect you with Will and get you the latest state of play and what that may mean for your, if there are longer term decisions that you have to make before things are finally resolved. Pivoting a little bit, we have Sandy Caseman from Salt Lake City, who works with the mayor of Salt Lake City on the call. And if anybody looks behind Hannah's shoulder, you can see a BioHive banner in her background. We've talked about digital trade. We've talked about Silicon Slopes, of course. BioHive is a new organization that has been, Salt Lake City has been very supportive of, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, World Trade Center Utah. We've been one of the founding members. There's a lot of Utahns and people outside Utah are surprised to learn that Utah is the fastest growing healthcare innovation hub in the United States. So we talk about our Silicon Slopes and software, and that's critical. And they're clearly, a few years ahead of the game. But over the past several years, we have Utah companies that are, whether it's biotechnology or working with big data to sequence genomes and use that for cancer treatment, medical device manufacturers. This industry is growing very, very quickly here in Utah, and we're helping those companies grow around the world. And we want to build up this brand so people think of Utah not just as Silicon Slopes, but as the biohive, and of course a hive being a play on the beehive state, and so that we can help people recognize the success that our companies are having here. And so question, Charlotte, Siraj raised a really good point. Right now, I believe in the UK, there's a lot of talk about reforming the NHS, and that's been such a critical institution in the UK for so long. With those reforms, there's been some debate about privatizing and bringing in the private sector a little bit more to get more new innovative technologies. Does that, and if that's not really a factor, that's fine. But as we think about the free trade agreement and growing the relationship, what opportunities exist in the UK for innovative healthcare companies, whether it's with medical devices or biotechnology, and what advice would you give to them to learn more about the opportunity and then to start making some connections to try to find whether it's on the outbound sell, investment, or joint venture, whatever it may be.
Great, thank you so much. So in our Department for International Trade team and Carlo's team, there is a dedicated lead for sort of healthcare and some of those sort of subsectors that you mentioned, and that will also be featuring as part of my virtual visit later in the week. So really fascinated that this has come up. So I think there will be a number of opportunities, I think, to sort of connect with the UK and sort of see what those opportunities could be. I'm going to pass over to Carlo just to talk a little bit about the focus of that team, who's been really active actually about helping work with US companies, driving investment into the UK, but also some of the collaborations. So Carlo, do you want to come in about the work of the team on the healthcare and science side?
Sure. I wish one of them was on the call right now because I am not a life sciences expert, but I will do my best. To start off with, I dropped a link in chat as a starting point for anyone that's interested in doing business through and with the NHS. There's a gov.uk page that serves as a good guide and can point you in the right direction. Life sciences is a focus sector for us because it is a sector of UK excellence. There's a huge life sciences cluster around London, especially in Cambridge, but also in other parts of the UK. Lots of American drug companies choose to do clinical trials in the UK because it's relatively easy to get them up and running quickly. The UK has also attracted a lot of investment from US genomics companies. And a couple prime ministers ago, there was a big genomics project launched where we were going to sequence 100,000 genomes as part of an R&D collaboration. Of course, biotech and medical devices, the UK is a hotbed for all of those sectors as well. So those are the areas where our team focuses. And I have to say there's a brisk business from the US to the UK and the UK to the US. We generally have a big presence at various trade shows like Bio and AdvaMed. Yeah, if you want to find out more, please drop me an email and I'll connect you to our life sciences team. Thank you.
Great, that's fantastic. Appreciate it. Okay, I've got more questions. I'm ready to talk agriculture, aerospace, and defense, a little bit more on digital trade, but I'm going to pause here just for a second to see if anybody wants to unmute themselves and jump in and ask a question.
Yeah, if I may, Miles, Jerry Lanchbury, I was going to ask the government group in general whether you can give us any logistical guidance. Emily, much as we love Zoom and we've learned to love Zoom, we actually would like to visit with colleagues again in the United Kingdom and really enrich those relationships, renew them and begin new ones. How do we think about borders? How do we think about flights? How do we think about logistics? I know that from Salt Lake, we've lost our direct flight to London that we used to have daily. can you give us any guidance as to how you see that situation developing and when we might normalize again?
Thanks so much for the question. That's a great question, and the million-dollar question, I think, in many ways. I mean, in terms of visiting the UK, we can send you separately a link that's on our .gov website. You need to have proof of a negative COVID test. There are quarantine periods, obviously, in the UK, and anyone travelling to the UK will also need to be in compliance with, the COVID restrictions that are sort of happening at the moment. And those will be different depending on the country of origin. But when I say country of origin, from where you're flying from. So we can send you separately a link that links to the US. On flights, that's a difficult one. So my understanding is that that flight from Salt Lake City stopped as a result, or sort of following on from the pandemic. So I, like everyone, hope that those flights can resume in the future. But there is a commitment from the UK government to do everything it can to stop the devastating impacts of the pandemic. We've got a very ambitious programme in the UK around vaccinating. I think about a quarter of the population have been given first shots of vaccines. The Prime Minister a few days ago in the UK laid out a roadmap for easing restrictions over the next number of months. So we are hopeful that life will return to normal, and obviously there is a big push within the US to do the same. So I think we'll need to see how that all goes. In the UK, we're driven by the science. What that's telling us around sort of COVID-19, the risks, making sure that our communities are safe. So it is difficult to set out more detail than that, I'm afraid. I think I, like you, am crossing my fingers and my toes that we will be able to meet in person again in the way that we used to do. And I also, despite recognising the benefits of Zoom, would also much rather be in a room with you all, enjoying a cup of tea. So I think, we'll need to see where things go. But I think there is hope. Things are moving in the right direction, I think. And the UK is also, committed to helping the position globally. So, for example, has invested a lot of money into making sort of vaccines accessible around the world, including to developing countries. So there's a real focus and ambition there to make sure that we can try and end this pandemic and support our people, our businesses, our communities through that, because people have been through really tough times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry, for that. And Brian, I see that you posted a question in the chat, but if you could just unmute yourself and perhaps you could provide a little bit more context around that, because I think it's a really good follow-up question on this topic.
Sure. So my company was actually planning on expanding into the UK and setting up a little office last year, and decided it turned out to be a very poor time to do that. So we held off. So we are looking to apply for a sole representative visa to establish, and then also do maybe one or two intercompany transfer visas. And just curious if anyone knows timelines. I know visa processing, I think, shut down for a few months at the beginning of last year. Things have opened back up. Should we expect delays? If we're thinking about June or July, since we saw the notice that that's kind of the target date for back to normality, is this summertime. Should we start now? Should we maybe wait a little bit? Are things back to normal or still slow? Just looking for guidance on moving forward with establishing that branch.
Thank you so much for the question, Brian. And I'm so delighted that you're looking to set up an office in the UK. So I'm going to pass over to Carlo in a moment to just make any sort of high-level comments on visas. Obviously, we can also share the relevant links with you, a government guidance on that after the session. I think, on sort of when is the right time, it's very difficult for me in complete honesty to comment, because it will very much depend on the circumstances of your business and how things are looking in the UK and what feels right to you based on that outlook. And, you know, it was definitely really encouraging that our Prime Minister set out this roadmap. But, you know, within that, there are dates of no earlier than that sort of set out the different stages of opening up different areas of the economy. But those are also based on, you know, certain conditions being met around the vaccination programme, you know, ensuring that there aren't sort of risks around sort of other variants coming on board. So it's very difficult for me to set out more certainty than that, I'm afraid. But, you know, I remain hopeful that, you know, we will start to see normality return in the future. I think there is the commitment there, the drive there from our government, absolutely. On visas, I'm just going to pass over to Carlo now to make any high-level comments for businesses. And then, of course, we can share relevant information and links with you after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I've dropped in chat a link to the UK's resources on visas and immigration. Also dropped a link to the UK government's COVID-19 resources, which has a section on international travel. I'm not sure I can do any better, Emily, in answering about visas and immigration. I mean, fundamentally, the process hasn't changed. It's just been practically affected by the effects of the pandemic. So there's a lot less of it happening, but the rules around obtaining visas and immigrations are still this. Well, there's actually one big change, of course, which is following the European exit, the EU exit, we now have a points-based immigration system, which you can read about on the resource in the chat, which means that there's no more free movement from other parts of the EU. And we have heard from some US investors in the UK who are concerned about that. But I think that there is a flip side to that, which is that it may be a bit easier now using the point-based immigration systems to get qualified job candidates in from other parts of the world, because everyone's on the same playing field now. So that's one that's worth thinking about. With regard to pandemic restrictions, I will just mention that there's testing and self-isolation requirements which you can read about on the link, but there are some exemptions for UK investors, people who are considering investment over a certain size. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you very much for that context. You know, Carlo, one key takeaway for me from today's discussion is that www.gov.uk is a phenomenal resource. And so strongly encourage anybody, for the questions that we haven't gotten to today, go ahead and, if you can see, look through the chat over and over and over again. Carlo is a master at working the website and lots of great information there. I encourage you to check out the information there. And then if you have additional questions, please reach out and we can help track down additional information for you. So looking at the clock, unfortunately, our hour for afternoon tea is come and gone. But thank you so much, Consul General Cloke, Carlo, and Will, for taking the time out of your busy days to share to have this discussion, to provide a little bit more context and color around these dynamics that create some disruption, right? And that's the case in any time there's new dynamics and new changes. But with that disruption comes opportunity. And there's opportunity to build out and strengthen the relationship, whether it's education partnerships, whether it's around digital trade, innovation, obviously life sciences and healthcare innovation, and then also aerospace and defense and in agriculture were two other topics that I see some significant opportunity and we plan to engage on from the Utah side, and we look forward to working with you. So thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to everybody for joining. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning, we've had a nice discussion. We've exchanged some ideas, and we've gotten some new information. We've learned a few things. Now it's time to go to work. Now it's time to think about, what does this mean for you and your company? And go ahead and reach out to us. We'll make sure you get the right connections with our partners representing the UK government, as well as our partners elsewhere in the UK. So you can go ahead and identify opportunities, open the right doors, get some momentum going, and go and do that to grow your business and to strengthen the partnership between the UK and Utah. So thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. We look forward to following up with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.